So
Perfect.
people will inevitably join as we go. But I wanted to start this Friday chats. And firstly, thank you for coming to the studio in person. You're the first of our guests who has come in person. Normally, we have done this over Instagram Live with the, you know, top and bottom kind of conversation. And when I found your podcast, I was genuinely like, oh my God, this podcast exists and it's an Indian podcast, which made me even more excited. And what I loved about your podcast was also the premise of it, because usually people in on YouTube or podcasters themselves, when they say I'm going to make a podcast revolving around coffee or revolving around some specific thing, they go into so much detail into that thing to the point where it stops becoming accessible to regular people. But what I loved about your podcast is that you use coffee as kind of like this entrance or this launch pad for talking about so many different kinds of topics: mental health, productivity, and coffee itself. How did you even hit upon that formula? Was there any kind of thinking to that? Did you want to make a podcast specifically about coffee and it didn't work? What was the thinking there?
So first of all, thank you for having me. I'm equally excited to record this episode from the studio
Yes.
because I like going out, meeting new people. Talking about the podcast, so basically it happened by accident,
Hmm.
where I was sitting in a cafe with my friend, obviously enjoying my coffee, and so usually what happens is when you go to cafes, you speak with people, and there are such good conversations that you thought, oh, what if I could record it and keep to myself and I could listen it whenever I want to. The same thing happened with me. I just wanted to record all the conversations I'm having over a cup of coffee. But then I thought, what if I could put it online, because there was many people who had same problems with mental health, productivity, problems with social media, or maybe with fitness. So I thought, what if I could help a lot of people by putting it online? And I researched and I saw that there are a lot of podcasts who only speak about coffee. I'm extremely passionate about coffee. I could only stick with that particular part,
Hmm.
but it would be too niche and people might not like it. I mean, still, there are 90% of the audience who just likes coffee and who does not speak about the scientific approach of getting into coffee or scientific things into brewing. And I mean, I could say into too much depth.
Hmm.
So my target audience was these 90% people who loved conversations over a cup of coffee and giving them some kind of brief to many other things. Because even the fitness podcast that we did, we spoke about many things from the above level, from the generic level.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it happened by accident, and I basically tried to get guests whom I'm very much curious to ask questions about. Um People who are very happy, first of all, people who love sharing knowledge, and something that's common is their love for coffee, because these conversations usually happen over a coffee.
Right. And these guests that you get, you've gotten such a almost eclectic variety of guests. And obviously, the one thing that unifies them is their love for coffee. So, one of the things that when, we are running our podcast is, of course, the stress that comes with finding good guests. So, whether that is going out or, sliding into someone's DMs on LinkedIn or wherever it is, like, of course, we did with
Mm-hmm.
you, it's always, this kind of 50-50 of people will either not get back to you or the worst they'll say is no. But the successful podcasters that we have worked with and the ones that have gotten success like yourself, they seem to almost have this very magical ability of getting people to say yes. What is a good way to pitch a podcast opportunity to be appear as a guest on a podcast? What is a successful pitch? Excuse me.
Okay. So first of all, even I had written a cold DM to many people,
Hmm.
and obviously, like you said, you do not get replies. There are people who say no to it. Obviously, it's their comfort, and I'm totally okay with that. But the people who said yes, so there are two things. First, I have researched about them thoroughly. Second, I had followed them for more than 2 months and known what they have done or what they are doing currently. So whenever I was pitching them, I took out a point from the previous life. For example, I could just give you an example. So there's someone called Priyank who's a fitness influencer and who's very much into fitness. So I was following him for more than 6 months, and I saw a live session where he was speaking about consistency. And I just thought if I could pitch something about his consistency and relate it back, I mean, telling his story to him that you had done this before, and I'm very impressed by this, which I am. So he would relate, and he knows that I've done the hard work of knowing him and following him throughout,
Right.
which is basically the uh, I can say idea or the catalyst of getting anyone on the podcast. But like you said, I've messaged 200 people.
Mhm.
Out of which 10 people do reply, and one of the person comes on the podcast. So yeah, I mean, this is something that no one sees behind
Of
getting
course.
someone on the podcast.
And do you feel that now, since you have made so many episodes, do you feel that that process has gotten easier, that you get more yeses than before?
Obviously, I do get more yeses because I have something to show
Hmm.
to other people. I mean, for example, if there's a coffee podcast and if I want to get someone, I can definitely show in the past if I'd got person A, B, and C. I mean, if they are well-known people, the D person would definitely come in and say, "Hey, even I want to be a part of yours." Or there are people who maybe approach you that I want to be a part of a podcast in case they need some kind of visibility or branding.
Right.
But again, the idea is not to just, I mean, take anyone on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's about to have beautiful conversations and conversations that I'm very much curious about because podcast right now does not. So obviously, it has that there's a need of podcast and having conversation because having conversation is one part, but there's a pre-podcasting and a post-podcasting. The pre is researching about the guest, knowing what he likes, what he does not like, what are the questions that you want to ask him, and the post is obviously editing, marketing it, putting it on platforms,
Hmm.
and a lot of other things as well, creating the um, thumbnail on the and putting it out. So
Exactly.
there's a lot of work that goes throughout the process, and you want to be happy and you want to keep doing it. So there's this kind of motivation that you want to find
Hmm.
for someone for bringing someone on the podcast. So now, I mean, just cutting it short, uh, I do indulge into conversations with people whom I'm very much curious to know more things about. So that's the simple idea.
And your podcast, it isn't a branded podcast,
No.
correct? No. So the when it comes to the podcast and how everybody wants to get branding or get sponsorships and everything like that, have you ever felt that pressure to tie up with someone for sponsorships or get turn the podcast into a branded concept?
Earlier, I loved the concept of having brands because you could make good money
Hmm.
with a podcast. But also, I knew the day I start making money out of the podcast, I won't be having that good of a community
Hmm.
of people who come and regularly listen to the podcast. Because now my idea is to pitch the brand's product to my community and not the ideas or curiosity that I have.
Right.
And so obviously, I'm not against branding or having a branded podcast,
Hmm.
but at the moment I still feel that I need to first settle my curiosity and have more interesting guests so that whenever in future a good brand comes and puts a deal on the table, I'm happy to do it.
Great. So, just kind of moving away from the podcasting for just a second, I want to talk to you about obviously the coffee thing. When did you first get into coffee? Because in India, we're more a chai country, but
Mhm.
how did coffee come into your life?
Okay, so again, this is by accident, and this happened something 3 years before.
Mhm.
I was in my college, and so usually you get attendance when you attend college festivals.
Hmm.
So you go out, and there are some festivals about colleges that happen. Those are inter-college festivals or intra-college festivals. And one of the sessions was a latte art workshop that was happening in June.
A what workshop, sorry?
Latte art.
Latte art.
Yeah, I mean, latte art is basically
Yes, the
putting
foam and yeah, making the
a
patterns
heart or
over
a
top.
tulip
Yes.
over the coffee.
Yes.
And for me, it was like instead of attending a boring lecture about mathematics, I could either just go to the latte art workshop and have a coffee. So that was the simple idea.
Nice.
And so we went to this cafe, which is in Jew. And I just loved the way how the barista poured the latte art. And I was very intrigued with the the process of making a latte art. It was basically getting a espresso, then foaming the milk, and then pouring it. The day I came home and I was like, I just want to learn latte art and nothing else. And I watched videos on YouTube. I mean, how I can make latte art from home
Mhm.
using home equipments. The curiosity started happening, and I searched a lot of more YouTube channels. I went and asked people of how I can do it at home.
Mhm.
Obviously, at home earlier used to do it with instant coffee, but I knew that this was not a good one,
Exactly.
and I bought a mocha pot, and that was just the start of the journey. 6 months later, I bought a French press, and again my curiosity started growing more. Now I was much more intrigued about other parts about coffee. So I started buying one like each equipments, and something. Again, this is a secret with podcasts. So earlier I used to DM people and ask them if they could help me with the coffee journey or letting me know something about coffee that I don't know.
Mhm.
A lot of people would say yes, but then people would say no, because why would someone want to help someone and spend like their precious time? So now the podcast, which is a digital format of content and put forward for many people, is a very easy way to get the right set of people. And if you want to know something, put it out for a lot of people.
Right.
So I use my podcast as a networking tool at the moment
Mhm.
and a learning platform for me, where a lot of people or a lot of guests I bring are people whom I want to genuinely learn things from.
I love that. Specifically, what you said about the whole, it's a learning thing. It's an excuse to learn, and it's an
Right.
excuse to grow. And I just want to ask, did you perfect the latte art? And what is the best pattern that you have made in latte art?
I did perfect the latte art, but after 200 failed latte arts, the best one that I made was a tulip.
Nice.
And so there are still days when I cannot make a good latte art, but there are days when I make a perfect heart or a perfect tulip. But the idea again started was whenever someone used to come to my home, I would obviously always offer them coffee.
Right.
And this started as an excuse to do more latte arts.
Brilliant.
And I have a lot of friends who do come to my place. I have a lot of coffee. I have a lot of guests and relatives who like the coffee. So again, after the 200 cup, I was able to make a decent latte art. But yeah, right now, if you check, I do keep a some tally of the total number of coffees that I make, and after 924th coffee, I can make a decent latte art.
Nice. And wow, 924. That's dedication right there. I don't know if I could ever do that, but in fact, what I found also so kind of endearing about your story is how similar it is to how I also got into coffee. So
Mm-hmm.
during the lockdown was when I kind of started drinking coffee more seriously. So I moved back to India from the US in around late 2019,
Mm-hmm.
and this was when I had kind of begun getting into coffee because over there in the US, chai isn't very commonplace, so coffee is kind of more normal. But when I came here, I noticed that there is this really cool kind of culture around coffee and the people who drink it. So I started initially with cold brews because I figured, I don't really like hot coffee. I'll try cold brews. So I tried to make some, and I was working on it when the first lockdown happened. And obviously, then a lot of companies were having difficulty with shipping and things. But one company that wasn't was Amazon. And nobody in my family we didn't have any of the equipment that we needed. And all the equipment that I had left in my place at the time. So I started experimenting with this Colombian instant coffee.
Yeah.
So they come in these little
Mhm.
sachets, and they had all these weird flavors. So I got into that. But then when the lockdown ended, that was when things just went into overdrive. I got the French press. I got I started making the filter coffee. I even have the South Indian filter coffee
Yeah.
tumbler sitting outside in the office itself, and learning how to like pour it in that way that gets it just right. There
Mhm.
was such a exhilaration to getting it. It's and the fact is there's still so much to learn that's
Yeah.
left. It's awesome.
So one thing is, the more you know about something, the more you'll know that you don't know about it.
Exactly. That's exactly it. They
Yeah.
should put that on a T-shirt, by the way. But yeah, that's always been like the cool part about what we do, even with podcasting.
Right.
Everybody comes to us and they're like, "Oh, you're the experts," but then we're just like, "Dude, we're just at the bottom. We're just at the base. There's still so much left to go, on this journey."
Yeah.
And the fact that you get to come on it with us, that's the even cooler part.
And this is about everything in life, everything that and every industry or any career that you choose, and you start discovering more things when you dive into the well, and then you figure out, oh, this is a new tunnel, and you could even explore that,
Exactly.
and that tunnel leads to many more other tunnels.
Exactly. Like I think that that is pretty much we just define passion in a nutshell. But yeah, it's exactly that. And coffee, I think, is such a great kind of entry point to that.
Yeah.
For so many people.
Right.
So
if I
sorry.
could just
Yes,
ask
please,
you
please.
something, where do you see yourself with coffee right now? I mean, since you mentioned that you took a French press,
Yes.
and this is just a podcaster asking a podcaster,
Sure.
what's your coffee routine?
So my coffee routine is I have normally a cup in the around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So my diet is fairly simple. I have breakfast in the morning, and I try to avoid having coffee then, just because I want to keep it light. Then there's lunch, and then at around 3-4 p.m. in the afternoon is then when I have what I guess you could call tea time or snack time. That is when I bust out the coffee and I have that. So 1 cup a day, and that has been the routine. And on weekends is usually when I have more, because I go outside, I hang out with friends, and usually we wind up going to a cafe or ordering coffee or doing something of that nature. So
Okay.
that's my daily routine with coffee. And the thing is, there was a point where I was drinking it quite excessively, to the point where I did get a little sick from it. So I did have to cut back on it a little bit. But instead of getting upset about it, I found that, obviously I get to enjoy whatever coffee I get. So I have to be a little bit more judicious with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it gives me now more time to focus on all the different kinds of coffee that is out there. In fact, I was at a Nature's Basket, and while I was there, I was just checking the coffee aisle, and there was this one packet that was there. It was like a white packet with like a red design on it. Simple, simple thing. The only one of its kind on that shelf, and it said Baba Budan coffee. And I was just like, this is the fact that there's only one bag of it there. That means that it's either so popular that everyone bought it, or so niche that no one knows about it. Either way, I wanted to see it. So I immediately took it off the shelf and I brought it back, and I found out the story of Baba Budan and how coffee was brought to India. And that was such a cool little bit of story on that journey for me.
Yeah. So, by the way, for people who do not know, I mean, just putting it out
Yeah.
as slowly or as in simple ways as I can. So, Baba Budan got 7 beans of coffee hidden in his beard and put it into some place in Chikmagalur, which is now called Baba Budan Giri. And that's how coffee started growing in India.
Exactly. And I believe it was the first ever time that coffee had been grown outside the Middle East. That's why it was Arabica coffee, because it was
Right.
native to the Middle East.
Mhm.
But and in India, it was the first time that someone had grown coffee outside of the Middle East. And also the story is like he took it in his beard, he held
Yeah.
it in his fist, he hit it in his cane. There's so many different variations
Right.
to that story, but it's just such a fascinating thing that this beautiful thing that we enjoy all over the world, it the first ever time it left its native country was pretty much as an illegal good, pretty
Right.
much. But that, yeah, it's I still want to go to Baba Budangiri one day, just like explore all the different estates in the area. Have you been?
I've not been, but again, this is something on my list.
Yes.
Probably this year during the harvest season, because I know a lot of people have been telling that once you go during the harvest season, you can see a lot of things, right from plucking the coffee cherries to the processing part, and you can see everything in action.
Brilliant.
So I'm hoping that I do visit at least one of the farms this harvest season, but I shall not. So I know going to one of the coffee farms, but at that time I was not into coffee, and I was much more interested about in the cocoa part, cacao, which are the cacao
Yeah.
cherries, and yeah.
It's speaking of your interest in the cacao thing. I was looking through your LinkedIn to figure out some questions, and I saw this thing that just I had to ask you. in 2016 you launched a chocolate toothpaste.
Yeah.
What was that? What was that all about? You got to tell me this story.
Okay. So this was in the second year of my college,
Okay.
and we there was a subject called entrepreneurship and something related to entrepreneurship, where each of us had to either launch a product or a service and pitch it to people. Now, obviously, so I was the most innovative person in the class, and I wanted to do something that people have not done before. So I thought, I mean, there are many pros and cons of chocolate, but when you see the pros and how it has been put in front of people, uh, I mean, a lot of things has not said yet. I mean, a lot of things are hidden. A lot of research needs to be done on chocolate and cocoa or cacao, to be more precise. And we thought, and there are brands in US that have chocolate toothpaste.
Okay.
Okay. Now, the people who do not like toothpaste are usually kids. And what if you get your favorite flavor, which is chocolate, in a toothpaste? Would your life would be so much easier? Yeah. So we made a chocolate toothpaste called Chocomoco, and we started it. We did give it to a few people to taste it and to try it out, which was great. And I don't know, but yeah, this was only for a project that happened in college.
So it is not available anywhere.
No.
Damn it. I would have
But by
definitely
the way,
done
this product is available in a foreign country.
A foreign country?
Yeah, by the name of some chocolate toothpaste.
Okay.
And the other thing is, so there are, we all have chemicals, right? And whenever you have a piece of chocolate, you instantly become very happy. Be it a dark chocolate, anything. And this was the premise of our research, which said if you start your day with chocolate, which is your toothpaste, you would be first instantly energized, you would be happy, and you start your day on a good note. So, leaving everything aside and making your kids easier to brush was
Right.
a main thing.
The thing is, I can just see kids, just wolfing down that toothpaste like ice cream at that. Just like they've got it up and they're just like squeezing the tube into their mouths at that point. Yeah, that's such a interesting idea when I heard it. It sounded like something out of Shark Tank or The Apprentice or
Yeah.
something like
I
that.
don't know why we did not go ahead with this idea, or even why we did not uh, put more effort into it, because at the time it was just like a college ka project hai to karna hai, and we do it and we leave it.
Right.
But when I look at now, I think I should have taken more risk, and I should have done more things in my college years.
Right.
If it fails, it fails, but you learn at least many other things.
Exactly. And that also, when I was in college in America, that one of the things that I saw that was slowly kind of rising in popularity there were these things called subscription boxes, where it was wine, it was coffee, it was, in fact, they have a subscription box there called Trade Coffee, which is where they get it directly from all the estates and from all over the world, and they send it to you in a curated box. So you do like a questionnaire and you fill it out, and you're like, I prefer lighter roast or darker roast. I prefer cold brew, or I like my coffee this, that, and the other. You answer all these questions. They send you this curated box, and I was just like, why hasn't this idea taken off in India? This idea ever since kind of the boom of Amazon, Flipkart, and all these kind of companies that are mailing you stuff to your door. Why hasn't subscription boxes become a thing? Because people want curation to some extent in their lives. So why is it that this idea hasn't become this gold mine in India?
I know a lot of companies in India who are doing subscription systems and
Okay.
subscription box, but there are two things. Okay, the pros and cons. Like you said, there's a questionnaire, and they do follow that. I mean, if you prefer light roasted coffee beans,
Yeah.
they would be going through all the good light roasted coffee beans in the market, giving it out, and sending you one every month. But on the second side, the cons that I know about is there are certain brands who curate this box, who are very good partners with a few roasters. Now, apart from the collaborative approach, they have taken the competitive approach of not promoting other brands, which are also good coffee beans. I mean, good coffee people.
Right.
Okay, so now the thing was, this is something that I've heard, and again, something that I've noticed. This brands, I mean, who prefer much, who do not collaborate, would not even scale up, because someone who knows coffee knows if a new light roast coffee beans is coming into the market, and I know where I need to place my order from. So the curation box or the subscription box do only give limited resources or limited beans, which is why it's not very famous in India. There are brands from abroad who are very much famous, and they give you world's best coffee in a month. I mean, depending on how you choose it. But in India, it's yet to take off.
Right.
And a brand that would come in future who is collaborative and who is only on the purpose of giving the best coffee beans will definitely success. I mean, will definitely go and hit the market.
Awesome. So we just need to wait for that one
One
very
brand to
dedicated
come in, yeah.
man. I hope it comes soon. And just another going off on a little tangent.
But sorry.
Yes, please.
Here again, a lot of times people's preference changes. So now in the first month you loved medium roast, and in the next month you want to try something with dark roasted coffee beans or something with the light roasted coffee beans, and you don't want to stick to a particular pattern.
Right.
There's again a lot of shift when it comes to these curated boxes, because now as a consumer I want to try all the different beans, all the different roasters. So and there's a limitation that comes, and even it becomes difficult for the brand to know your preference on a monthly basis.
Right.
So yeah.
But I once had the idea. So there's this thing called the TCM Wine Club in America, where basically it's a subscription service that pairs wine with movies, the Turner Classic Movies. So what they would do is they'd send you a box of wine, and there'd be a little card that would be like, this is the movie that it's paired with. And some of these wines are like themed wines, so like the wine would be named after a certain actor or a certain movie or something. And I was like, that is such an interesting kind of thing of pairing two different products with each other that is a good marriage and is a good blending of two interests from your dedicated target audience. So I was thinking, what if we did something with coffee where we partnered it with another product? And I was like, what do people who drink coffee normally do while they're drinking their coffee? They are reading. So what if there was a kind of coffee book club kind of thing where people sent you curated coffee and paired it with a book that you could easily get your hands on and read it? I think that would be
This is a brilliant idea.
This is a brilliant idea.
If anyone's listening this and has some spare time, they could maybe venture this idea on.
And if anyone has some spare money, please give it to me and I will act on it for you.
Definitely.
But okay, coming back to the main meat of this podcast, you work primarily with startups now. You work for a company called Startups Rousseau. Am I pronouncing that right?
Startup Rousseau, yeah.
Startup Rousseau, yes. So, do you feel where did the fascination for startups specifically come from? Because you seem to have this, you described it as an obsession with startups.
I did internships in MNCs.
Okay.
I did an internship with Edelweiss where I loved the internship, but again, there are certain pros and cons to the MNC life as well. First, you do not get recognized for your work. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of hierarchy. And working in a startup basically solves a lot of problem. The first one about doing what you like. And obviously the team is small, you know everyone, you know what accountability everyone plays. So you could directly reach out to the right person. And obviously the work is more in a startup compared to an MNC life.
Right.
But it's again the joy of work that does not let you burn out.
Exactly.
Right. You can explore and you can experiment with many different things. That's why I like working with startups and in a startup, because the work-life balance, obviously it's there. You get to learn so many different things, because when you when you work in an MNC, you only do a specific task. Now, when you work in a startup, you do 10 different tasks. And somewhere I feel in life, I want to do everything, because we only got, everyone has one life. And I want to do marketing. I want to learn finance. I want to do the HR stuff. I want to even go and pitch. Obviously, I know that I won't be good at everything, but I want to do all the things and then discover what I'm extremely good at and what I'm not extremely good at, and what seems boring to me and what seems very much interesting to me.
Yeah.
So working in a startup basically keeps everything on a table for me, and I get to choose what I like. So again, working in a startup life is a fun life for me.
Awesome. And startups, I feel like, are such a interesting space because many of them have such cool ideas about taking things. In fact, if I could just also tell you a story as well.
Hmm.
So, my father actually used to work for Birla, and he was telling me this story where, so Birla had this clothing. I think they own pantaloons. I think it was. So this was in around the early to mid 2000s or the late 2000s, I think. And this was around the time the companies like Myntra and everything were slowly kind of coming into the market, and they weren't making money at that point because they hadn't scaled up yet, and they were kind of subsisting off venture capital money. So my dad, who was in the kind of room of the board, told me this story, and I found it so interesting that the kind of analysts who were there, the consultants, were telling everyone about how great the year had been financially and how pantaloons, the clothing brands and the companies are doing such great business. And there was this one old gentleman who was sitting kind of in the room as well, and he kind of just out of nowhere asked, "What about online? What are we doing about the online thing?" And my dad described how the consultants kind of looked at him with just this look of utter disgust on their faces. Like, who is this guy questioning us? Who is this guy telling us this thing? And they're like, why would we want to do online? These companies, they're not even making any money. They're loss making. And this old guy just says, but this is the future. And lo and behold, he was right. And it happened. Startups are such a fascinating space. And it's people kind of look at them now and they feel, oh, they're not making money, or oh, I'm not making the kind of money I would have expected to make. Something that is very true to podcasters as well. Many of them, kind of come in and they're like, how do I make money? How do I get sponsorship? How do I, basically find a way to quit my day job and do this thing full time? And it takes a lot of patience, doesn't it?
Mm. Yes, definitely. I mean, so this is something that I've taken from one of the person whom I admire a lot. That patience is very much important with everything you do in life, be it podcasting, because I know it's a very, very long journey, and getting success on the first year in the first 50 episodes is also not possible. Someone like Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss got the success after doing a lot of episodes. And right now, when someone says, "Hey, I want to be like Joe Rogan, I want Spotify to take my podcast and pay me this much amount," but they do not know that Joe Rogan had earlier recorded so many episodes, got the best people, and then did it.
Right.
And podcast, like patience with everything, is very much important.
And the visibility too, because Joe Rogan was also, he was, I believe, a commentator on MMA. He did the Survivor, the TV show. He was the host of some
Right.
kind on that. So people already knew who he was before he started the podcast, didn't they?
Hmm.
And Tim Ferriss as well was kind of already a motivational speaker and
Speaker and
writer
everything.
before he got into the whole
Right.
podcasting thing.
But one thing that makes them who they are is consistency.
Exactly.
So if you know, and some consistency is something that even I face a lot of challenge with, is because they have recorded like a episode every month. Or in the every week, whatever their timeline is. So people who are extremely consistent and who follow the routine definitely get success. But like you mentioned, so I would quote. So Gary Vee is the person who says a lot of things about patience, and anything in life, anything great in life does not happen instantly.
Right.
There's a lot of hard work and patience that goes through uh, into the making of a successful person or a successful venture.
Exactly. And more than that, also, it's this, the consistent amount of practice as well, because so many people kind of expect just lights turns on, or the next day comes and suddenly they're a completely different person, and they'll suddenly start doing it. Everything will go right. Everything will just fall into their lap exactly how they always wanted it to be, and nobody kind of realizes that there needs to be this upward trajectory of quality in terms of the work you do and the amount of practice that you put in to get to that point. Everybody's just kind of like, it'll happen one day, the big guy will give me a shot and suddenly everything will go right. And it's all, for me, it's very tragic when I see people kind of think this way, because mainly because I used to think that way once myself. But it's sad because you have these people who are clearly unhappy with what they're doing maybe in their life, or they, at least that's how they sounded when I spoke to them. And many of them even have decent ideas about what to do, or they seem passionate about it, but because there's just this culture of the success needs to be instant, the success needs to be, you need to start having like thousands of listeners right out of the gate. It discourages them so quickly. Some of them come in and they have these brilliant ideas, and then within like 5 episodes they're done. It's genuinely tragic.
So one of the reasons again why I started podcasting was I was never good with English and speaking with people. In in my school days, I was an introvert, and striking a conversation with anyone was a big problem. I still know that my English is not the best in the what you could find, but it's much better than the first episode that I had recorded. And I know that if I do more 25 episodes, it's going to be much better. If you speak about everything like the expression, the communication styles, getting the most out of the people, striking a good conversation, being very much articulate with everything is something that I've learned after recording 29 episodes.
Yeah.
And I know there's so much more to learn. And I know that someday, maybe after 100 episodes or after 200 episodes, I am going to learn it in a much better way of what I am right now.
Exactly.
So maybe having that kind of motivation, or I can say a side hustle. It's not a side hustle, but something that you look at a side interest or something, would definitely help for people who are only looking at 5 episodes and I want a brand to sponsor me my rest of the podcast episodes.
Right. Yeah, it's in fact I also describe myself as an introvert, and when I was starting out with having to talk to people in a podcast setting, I remember it being, a very nerve-wracking experience where if you listen to that first episode I did of this show, and I just said some of the weirdest things, and I'm just like, I come out and everybody's just like laughing at like, why did you say that? Or what was that expression on your face when you were doing that? But now it's like, it feels so much more natural. It feels so much more, and I still feel like I could obviously be better as a host or as a conversationalist, but it's getting there. It will get there. And it took, this is now, I think, we're past 10 episodes on this show, and the fact that it'll get better on the 20th, the 30th, hopefully even
Obviously.
beyond that.
Yeah.
It's very exciting to think about. But something you said about how during your first episode you were, you felt that your English maybe wasn't very good, or it was a very difficult experience compared to how it is now. I wanted to ask, what was making your first episode like compared to making your most recent episode, in terms of maybe the equipment, how easy it was to get your guest, the conversation. What was the difference in scope between the two?
So in the first episode, so even right now, I won't blame the equipments because it's you. I mean, you could even record a very good episode just using a microphone, and even that could take you like a 10,000 listeners, and you could even record a very good, a decent kind of episode using the best mic and the equipments, and not have those many listenerships.
Right.
So I won't blame the equipments or anything at the moment. But in the earlier conversation, I think I was not very much articulate with what I was thinking. I have this problem of talking too fast. I have a lot of things in my mind, and I speak at a very rapid pace. And so after 29 episodes, I've been much calmer, much slower. I've been able to articulate, I mean, much better than I was able to do it before. And I can sense the expression that the guest has when he's sitting next to you or sitting in front of you, and how excited he is. For example, when you speak about coffee, I saw your eyes lit up.
Yeah.
And for example, we get to have this conversation for the next 1 hour and you won't be bored.
Exactly.
But there's something that might bore you off. And this type, like learning people or learning emotional intelligence, if I had to put it in the right words, is something I'm much better at after 29 episodes. But again, for podcast, I do keep a timer of 30 minutes or 35 minutes, because I don't want people to. I mean, it's not still a Joe Rogan podcast where anyone would listen to for 4 hours with someone, and obviously it gets tiring,
Right.
even to record and even for the guest at the current stage. But yeah, if there's something And if there's someone who I wish to record for 4 hours, I would definitely do it and put it out. I won't be restricted to algorithms or something that would prefer
Right.
the times.
And is there a favorite episode that you have? So if I could just give you my favorite, it was with I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Aun, A-U, Aun, where
On.
you guys on,
Yeah.
where you were talking about productivity and time management, all that kind of stuff. And it was such a for me that was such a great conversation because I've been kind of going down the rabbit hole a little bit on all the kind of productivity YouTubers and everything, and how everybody just is like, you should do this or you should do that. But I love the conversation because a lot of it seems so kind of such practical advice coming from him. Uh, do you have a favorite episode?
I cannot pick out any favorite episodes because each episode is like a baby to me, and you cannot compare your babies. But because each of the guests or each of the conversations that I've had, there's something to learn from each person. And obviously, I do look up to all of them, and yeah, it would be very difficult to pick out a favorite episode. But yeah, I love all my episodes.
That is the right answer. That was a trick question I was trying to
Yeah.
throw at you, because honestly, I feel like I've asked this question to quite a few podcasts, and every single one of them is like, I genuinely cannot pick one. I couldn't tell you a favorite, but um, it's kind of like almost with when you make coffee for the very first time. It's like when you try to start experimenting and you go through all these different people. Sometimes people tell me, what is your favorite uh, way of making coffee? So initially I'd be like, oh, it's cold brew. It's
Yeah.
cold brew because I like my coffee cold. But ever since I started getting into French press and getting into filter coffee and South Indian and classical filter coffee, it was now I find it much harder to give a straight answer on that one because when you make it, when you're actually getting into the kind of nitty gritty of it, when you're pressing down on the
Yeah.
French press, it's such a feeling, that this is happening. You're making it's this very kind of
Hmm.
primal thing. So and so I just wanted to ask, and I'm hoping you might have an answer on this. With your coffee, is there a favorite method that you have? No, right?
No. So there's no, I don't have a favorite method because I'm in love with the process of making coffee.
Yes.
Be it pour overs in the morning or latte arts in the evening. I mean, I just love everything about coffee and the process of how you can make this beautiful drink and with so much experimentation, and you could basically be an artist.
Hmm.
Again, something in this country baristas are not that much well known for.
Yeah.
They are someone as similar to an artist, and the respect that you give to an artist is not similar to that you give to a barista.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you could be your own artist, and you just love the process of making a coffee rather than judging it and giving it marks or having a preference over a brewing
Yeah.
pattern. And it could be totally different. I mean, you like French press, that's great. I like pour over, that's great. But there are people who say, oh no, he does not know things because he only prefers a particular brewing equipment, and he's great because he is famous. It's the wrong thing that I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, again, the process is much more important to me than the end product.
Speaking of processes, have you gotten into blending coffee blends? So when I was leaving the U.S., there was so in America they have these things called Starbucks Reserves, which are basically just like any other Starbucks, but where they only sell you their experimental drinks. So these are drinks that they're not yet bringing to their regular outlets, and they're just testing these with the customers to see if customers like them or not. So I went there just kind of like in the last month that I was there. And I've been kicking myself ever since for not going there more often. But there was this drink that they had there called Microblend number 11. And it was basically a blend of Guatemalan and I believe it was Ethiopian coffee. They blended it together, they found the right mixture, and it made this very creamy, delicious coffee that when I drank it for the first time, I honestly, my reaction was, this is Horlicks. I'm drinking Horlicks. And then, a few months later, I go into the Starbucks just up the street here, and they have this thing called a cold brew malt. And then they're like, they keep telling me, you've got to try it, you got to try it. So one day I cave and I'm like, fine. and they give it to me, and I'm like, this is it. This is exactly what I was having. This is Microblend 11. But I actually tried to recreate it myself, where I was getting like, I'd go to Starbucks and I'd get like the Guatemalan and I get the Ethiopian, and I'd try mixing the coffee grounds together, and the result was not good at all. But I wanted to ask, have you had any experience with kind of blending coffee grounds together, and is there like a science to it?
Oh, I do it at my home a lot of times
Oh God, you're
because
so ahead of me.
so basically blending. So you could do two things. Okay,
Okay.
first a bean which is not fresh. I mean those are over 3 months or 4 months. You could blend it with a good bean. Second, you could blend Arabica beans with Robusta beans. I mean 80% of the Arabicas and 20% of the Robustas. And that would give you much better cappuccinos and lattes or milk-based beverages. I mean, again, this is my preference, and yours could be totally different from it.
Right.
So I could blend Arabicas and Robustas. I mean, those are two bean types. And the third one is matching two different estates, because both of them have their own characteristics. And I mean, the third bean that you get, I mean, from estate 1 and estate 2, that if you could blend it, then you could basically make a third estate which is totally different and such. I mean, it could be very much better. So you could do it. I mean, these are the three ways in which I do it. And again, it's all play for me, because it does not feel like very much technical or something that I look into.
And is in terms of the process, is it as simple as just mixing the grounds together, or is there like is there a bit more of a complexity to it, or is it just you finding the right ratio of grounds to mix together?
You find the right ratio and then you again experiment. For example, like I said, the 80-20 for Robusta and Arabicas, you could even go with 92% of Arabica and 8% of Robustas. Which I do, if I mean 16 grams of Arabica beans and 4 grams of Robusta beans. You could even do it with grams. Again, I won't get into too much technical things. I'd want people to experiment things.
Exactly.
Because the process of experimenting and knowing things will make you much more better. By the way, I still know that once I mixed coffee beans with cacao beans, and that coffee was one of the best coffees that I have had it.
Yes. In fact, when sometimes when I'm making stuff that has chocolate in it, like a chocolate dish, I sometimes put a little coffee powder in the chocolate, because it boosts the flavor like nothing else. And coffee and chocolate are such a great kind of
combination,
mix.
yeah.
But you did actually make me very happy, because I genuinely, when the result of mixing the grounds together didn't give what I thought would happen, I genuinely thought like I was doing it wrong, or there was some special equipment that was needed. But the fact that it's just a question of ratios and figuring it out, now
and do what you like. I mean, do experiment. It's again like A/B testing.
Yes.
You do process A, you do process B, you like process B. Now, what's similar? I mean, what's something that you would like above process B? So you do A/B testing, and then you figure out what you like.
Exactly. Yeah. So now a lot of coffee vendors are now going to be seeing orders with my name attached to them, because I'm just going to be buying bags and bags and just trying to figure it out from now on. And I want to make that special, is the third estate, as you called it. I'm definitely going to do that. So I wanted to ask another question, sort of tying coffee and podcasting together. So coffee right now in India, there's kind of almost I don't want to use the word saturation, but it does feel like that in a way, because you have many companies selling, coffee. Sometimes there's an overlap from the estates as well that they get their coffee from, and they sell it in the same kind of, we sell Arabica coffee, Robusta coffee. There isn't that much in terms of the variety here. And many of the vendors here stick to local estates, Indian estates. Casey Roasters, I think they have one estate outside India that they source from in Colombia or something. And Dope Coffee, I think, has a few, and Blue Toka, I don't remember the exact number. But in podcasting, there also feels like there is that similar kind of overlap and saturation, where you have people coming we have had people come to us and they're like, oh, I want to do a business podcast, and I want to talk to leaders of business. I want to talk to them about their journeys and their thing. And every time I hear their idea on the phone, it's like my heart just sinks because I'm like, I've heard this idea. I've heard this idea 10 times before. I've heard this idea 20 times before. It's every single person, and their mother comes to me and they're like, I want to make a business podcast where I talk to business leaders. And then, I wind up asking, like, are you someone, do you know these leaders? Are you a business leader yourself? Is there some way that you're going to make this show unique to yourself? And they're all just like, no, I just want to talk to leaders and hopefully get sponsored and everything. And it's genuinely so depressing when you hear that. But as someone who took an idea of coffee and expanded it into such a unique premise, and as someone who also has experience with the as a coffee aficionado, what is the secret to standing out in a very saturated field? Or at least, what is the secret to, if not, you might not have necessarily the most unique premise, but what is the secret to branding it in a way that you stand out?
Oh, this is a awesome question because when I started my podcast, after which again there are people who come to me and speak on, hey, I want to start a podcast about coffee and about I want to do this, and I know that there are podcasts in the market who do the similar thing,
Yeah.
but the something that differentiates between people who want to do something is people who do something.
Mhm.
So even if there's someone who wants to do a business podcast, but the thing is they want to do things, they do not actually put that hands into it and get dirty with it. They do not write cold DMs to people. So something that differentiates people is persistence and getting things done.
Mhm.
Because if you would do a business podcast and if I would do a business podcast, it would be totally different because we are both different individuals.
Right.
And I mean, obviously our marketing patterns or our strategies would be different. So everyone in the world is different and everyone can stand out in a different way. It could be a business podcast about women leaders. It could be a business podcast about youth entrepreneurs, or maybe people who are solving some social issues. But it's basically getting things done and actually getting dirty with it
Right.
is what I think differentiates people. Again, a lot of people want easy routes. They want easy ways of getting things done. I mean, again, I've got a lot of messages of people telling, hey, can you introduce me to 5 roasters? And I would record 5 episodes with them. And I would say I am the best coffee podcast in India. And I want another brand to pay me money to record these 5 episodes. I would The simple answer that I gave to one of the person was, hey, why don't you write cold DMs to them? And this is what I do. I can give you my cold DM template, but you need to go out and find out whom do you want to record and write to them. I mean,
Exactly.
but no one wants to do the hard route or the hard way,
Mm.
and people want easy things. And like we spoke earlier, nothing great in life is easy.
Yeah.
So that's what I think differentiates people between who are getting things done and people who are just speaking about ideas.
Exactly. And I think you put it very, very eloquently how the importance, it's always, no matter how, many people come in to make the process easier, no matter how many people come and say, we're here to help you, with expertise at the very least, or, we're here to help you get your hands on the equipment that you need. It still always, 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 always comes back to, the passion that you have for your idea. It always comes back to that, and it has been that way since everything began, pretty much. So, in terms of that was in the past. So, in terms
Mhm.
of the future, where do you see podcasting growing based on the podcasters that you have spoken to? How do you feel that this space is growing in India specifically?
it's it's going to be very huge, because first if you map different players or different consumers who consume podcasts, first number of people who have started consuming podcasts is more because you could do it in multiple ways.
Hmm.
First you could listen to it whenever you're driving or whenever you're doing a passive work. It could be driving, maybe doing some house chores or something, I mean doing
Yeah.
some work, and you could listen to a podcast. Second, you are actively listening to a podcast and making notes out of it because you want to learn something.
Right.
And third, because you follow a particular person and you want to consume everything that they want to do it, but in the most informal way because videos are scripted,
Mhm.
videos are you are in the best format. Podcast in podcast, there's a lot of unsaid stories which come out.
Hmm.
So I think from the consumer side, it's going massive. Second, brands know that podcast is the future, and that's why they are putting money into that.
Right.
Uh, I mean, because of which a lot of people want to do podcasting now.
Yeah.
Okay, so brands know where the attention is, where a lot of consumption is. Just some normal facts: Spotify, which is one of the leading podcast uh,
Hosts.
hosts and who promote a lot of podcasters, has put this research that they're also setting up a new team in India who would be promoting podcasts and podcasters because they know that the demand is high and the supply is less.
Right.
So again, if you go to the podcast chart, they're only top 50 and they are the only ones who keep on repeating.
Right.
So that's the reason they are coming out with more Spotify originals or Spotify exclusive podcast. And similar with Apple Podcast or Geo7.
Mm-hmm.
These are just to name a few brands. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, there are so many more brands coming up. The third is the podcasters because now, because of the internet and the technology, the only thing that you need is a microphone.
Yeah.
You could even record it on your phone. You could go out and speak with someone, and that could be recorded on your phone and put it out for people to listen to it. Example, if I did a podcast with Virat Kohli on my phone with a lot of background noise, would people listen to it? Yes.
Hmm.
And if I did a podcast with someone who people do not know about in maybe the best of the studios in the city, will people listen to it? The answer could be no.
Right.
So again, it's the conversation that happens, the information that you are putting out, and how much helpful you are,
Right.
and the value that you're putting out that matters.
Exactly. And you mentioned how corporates are now kind of getting into podcasting. If you could just talk about the business benefits of a company, maybe not a corporate necessarily, but like a startup, for
Mhm.
example, or an organization. What would be the business benefits of starting your own podcast for your company or your organization?
Mhm. So, in the recent times, if you track a lot of brands, they're very high on building communities
Yes.
because right now the only thing that matters is how much loyal community do you have, and I think podcast is one of the easiest way of building a loyal community
Hmm.
because social media, something like Instagram, is overrated at the moment.
Right.
You see, the demand is obviously good, but there's a huge supply to it as well.
Mhm.
I mean, everyone right now puts something, is a creator who,
Mhm.
who puts anything on Instagram. In the podcasting world, the demand is high, but the supply is low.
Mm.
So the brands know where the attention is and they could provide value and record anything. I mean, they could record something as similar as maybe a business pitch.
Right.
I know podcast which is basically a pitching session. I mean, they call startups and they ask them to pitch in 5 minutes, and the podcast just puts the startups pitch maybe every Friday.
Mhm.
So again, that's a very great idea and a very very great idea to connect with a lot of startups in a informal way.
Hmm.
And the third benefit, which I feel is a networking tool. Again, what I use for my personal advantage too as well.
Right.
I mean, you build very good networks with people who you call over your podcast
Mhm.
or you go to someone's podcast.
Hmm.
So again, networking is a side effect to it, but one of the major advantages is networking.
Exactly. And I want to end with one final question, revisiting a question I already asked you. But so I have a friend who does podcasting, and he has a very specific, very niche kind of podcast where he does. It was initially started as a solo project. It would just be him kind of talking and sharing his views. And he did a few episodes, and now he wants to do more of them, but he wants to talk to people. So, but the one thing that he's kind of struggling with is that when he approaches people and he tells them, like, this is what I am thinking, this is the podcast that I have, people kind of are like, this seems like, a little lowbrow, a little kind of too niche for us to be interested in. And it's gotten to the point where he's kind of had to come to them with a whole new idea that caters specifically to them. And he's like, this thing that you like to do, I'm open to doing it. And the thing is, when he told me that, what really struck me was how sad he seemed. That this idea that he had started, that he was so kind of really into, uh, he wasn't able to communicate effectively, just how passionate he was about it to other people and convince them to get on board. It wasn't that they weren't coming on board, it was that he couldn't convince them to get on board. So, uh, you said you had a template for when you were cold DMing people. If you could just maybe tell me one or two of the particulars of what you put in a cold DM, because you've had probably, I imagine, a better success rate than he has.
Mm. So, like I said earlier, I'd message to even 100 people, and
Right.
the ratio is quite low. The only thing is, I've approached to more people,
Mm.
and I've got more no's earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The template to cold DM is again something very similar. You follow the person thoroughly for the first 2 months.
Mm.
You like research about the ins and outs, what is interesting to them, and then you ask for what you want.
Right.
For example, if I took cold DM you and maybe I wanted to host you for my particular podcast, and I know that you are a coffee fan, I would say, hey, I know that you are a coffee fan and you love blends, which is from two different estates. And why don't we speak about blending in business world? It could be blending and collaboration in the business world.
Mm.
Now, this is something that I've known about you with taking the reference of a previous thing or something that I take from research and then put my ask. You would be much more interested in coming on board as a podcast. I mean, for the podcast, or maybe
Right.
doing a collaboration for
Right.
XYZ thing.
Right.
For this particular episode as well, when you guys said, hey, I mean, we are all podcasters and you want to do something similar, I mean, record a podcast, I know that I like podcasting, I like speaking with people. And for a fact, even you mentioned that we would do it over a cup of coffee
Yeah.
in the DM. So that's something that interested me because you researched or you knew that I'm a coffee fan.
Right.
So I think researching about the guest is much more important, because if I don't go with the context, I mean, context here is very important. You would basically do not get the results that you're getting
Mm-hmm.
out of it. And research takes a lot of time
Mm.
and a lot of effort. So you could either message to 3 people a day, but spend 30 minutes researching about them and what
Right.
they have done before. But yeah, again, still, I want to get so many people on my podcast, and I'm still on the way. But I know for a fact that I will get them somehow
Right.
in future.
Yeah.
And the second way is building a network. For
Exactly.
example, so this is again something that I'm manifesting. I want to get Ranveer Singh on my podcast
Oh wow.
because he is a coffee fan and he likes everything about coffee. And there's something similar that I connect with him. Now I know for a fact that if I cold DM him, I would not get a reply. Now the next way is I know someone he knows, and how can I get in connect with this person? I mean, person A who knows Ranveer Singh. Now, if in case to reach to person A, first I will have to reach to person B. So you maybe figure out this tree where in case you want to reach to person A, you need to meet and network with all these people who could help you reach out to person B.
Mm.
So I mean, network, and this is a networking tree that's in my mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do not, I mean, again, patience and persistence of doing things is very much important here. And I
Yeah.
know for a fact that someday I would be hosting him on my podcast or doing a chat with him over a cup of coffee. But till then, I need to keep on doing the work that I'm doing.
And I don't doubt that you'll get him one day. And I just want to end on, since you mentioned networking and you used the metaphor of a tree, I think not only is the building of that tree so important, the growing of that tree, but also the, maintaining of that tree, the consistent watering of that tree. Because building the networks is one thing, but maintaining them, that's where the real challenge comes in, I've always found.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's why I say keep your roots grounded, because people will obviously remember you of what you have done, but people won't remember of what you have done, but they would definitely remember of how you made them feel.
Yes.
So you keep your roots grounded, you be a good person. And one of the things that I believe totally is being a good person goes a long way. So you give value and do it selflessly for people, so that when time comes, they even do it for you.
Exactly. And I think that's such a beautiful way to kind of end this podcast. But Adi, thank you so much for coming onto the show. It was an absolute pleasure to have you. And you even brought some cold brew for us as well. I was genuinely not expecting that. And it was such a pleasure. And I hope that we can be a part of each other's networking tree, and I would love to one day come over and taste some of that latte art that you mentioned earlier in the episode.
For sure. And I loved doing this episode because this is the first time I'm doing it from a studio.
Right.
And I was very excited for doing this. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And, if you are ever in need of a studio, please do reach out to us. We'd love to have you come in and work on your podcast with us as well.
For sure. Definitely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adhi.
Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right.
We're gonna end the live.
Brilliant.